tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So today, Saturday the 8th of November, and it's the end of day 3 of our forest, autumn forest work period, often referred to as work month, work monk, and it's 3 weeks of dedicated work, and it's lovely to see both members of the lay community coming and also other monastics. A few other members of the monastic community from other monasteries coming to help us out, and so I'll also say thank you to everybody involved. And of course, a lot of those people aren't here tonight, so our local lay residents and our forest manager, they're not here this evening, but I was very, very happy to get out into the forest this afternoon and just check in near the end of their afternoon work period. Amazing how much has been done already in 3 days, and really helps sustain that aspect, a very important aspect of our monastery. So much gratitude, and also our monks that are leading it, and Ten Chagadamo, Ten Cianado, of course Tenjo Dipano and Ajahn Ahimsako were out there this afternoon. So the last couple of days here in the monastery, about 10 or 12 of us residents we received a 2-day training course, 2-day course, mental health first aid. So mental health first aid, and some of our monasteries have done this before. I know at Amravati every few years they get a course run. I don't know how many have been done over the years, but as far as I'm aware, this is the first time we've done that here, and it was voluntary in terms of us, those of us who were interested, and of course those of us who are maybe more on the front line of meeting with guests or leading the community. Maybe there were more of us on that, but not necessarily. It was great. It was just some of our lay residents, and there was a whole spectrum of people. And I personally found it very, very helpful. And one of the terms that came up, and something we did touch on a little bit, is a term in English called spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing, and for those of us who are living here, I briefly touched on it this morning at the communal breakfast, and it's a very understandable. One can kind of understand on how this can happen. And so, of course, I'll go through some examples. It's understandable, but it's something that it can be a real obstacle to true spiritual growth. And so examples of spiritual bypassing is, for instance, when we use, and of course I'm using Buddhism, in particular Theravada Buddhism as my reference point, but for instance using the key features, that's not the right word, but the central teachings of the Buddha, in particular around impermanence, emptiness, not self, nature of things, and the unsatisfactory or suffering nature of all things. So these are the three what we refer to in English as the three key characteristics of existence. And so that all things are impermanent. So this is a blunt statement of the Buddha, not just a suggestion. You say, no, all things are impermanent. And then our job as practitioners is to reflect on our own experience life to come to that same realization, not to just read the book, hear the words, and take that on as a belief system, and okay, done that one. Okay, everything's impermanent. Maybe take a cursory look in our practice, in our life, and see that, and intellectually understand that. But if we just kind of take that on too superficially and then kind of move on, or in any way, is it maybe we haven't penetrated, really realized for ourselves, no, really, like really everything. We don't have to say it, we don't have to think it, we don't have to read it, we know in our guts. And so the same thing with the anatta, or the not-self nature. So the empty of essence nature of all things is that, and this is probably the most difficult of the three characteristics, that there's no sort of true, lasting, permanent essence, continuing essence of anything. So an example is it? So this is a chair, a seat, and so. But is there any seatness in this? Is there any essence of seat in this seat? Well, you can say, well, no, it's actually wood. And then somebody else says, no, tree. It's a tree. And then somebody else goes, well, no, actually it's the soil and nutrients around the tree. No, what was the soil before the soil? What was, and then you can go, it's just come together. There was an acorn got dropped somehow, maybe a bird or the tree or whatever, and before it was an acorn, it was something else. And then the soil and the water and the light, and then it grew into a tree, and then somebody cut it down, and there's planks, and then somebody decided to make something that we call a seat. So I think you get what I'm pointing at. I'm using very simplistic terms because it's actually fairly simple in many ways, is that there's no essence of seat. Just right now it's a seat. Right now it's wood, and we call it a seat. But we apply that to all things. So that's in particular around the human nature. Is it, and because it's the clinging to our identity, clinging to what we think we are, what other people think we are, that is where we suffer. That's where we suffer. We cling to things. We fight over, we argue over what we call things, what we believe things to be. And so that's the anatta element. You know, we're not. Our essence is not this body. Our essence this is not our essence. This body comes into being. It changes. It gets sick. All sorts of things happen. You know, against our will. We only have a modicum of control, and then we die, and it fades away. And somebody scatters our ashes around the stupa back here, or whatever. So on a superficial level, intellectual level, it's not particularly challenging to come to that understanding. But here again, like with impermanence. Our work as spiritual practitioners is to really penetrate that to where it's no longer an intellectual understanding. It is gut, heart level understanding. And we're at peace with that. We're even though it might bring up certain emotions, but we're at peace. We can actually coexist with that understanding and be peaceful, be at ease. And then the third one is the dukkha, or the unsatisfactory suffering, discontent, dis-ease, pain, stress of all experiences, all things. So this one is I know for me intellectually, it was the first time I heard the one of the expressions around dukkha is that all things are dukkha, all things are suffering. So because there's lots of nuances and different translations and aspects, facets of dukkha. And when I first heard that all things are suffering, I was like, no. At that time in my life, pretty much everything was going my way in that time of my life when I heard that. So I was like, no, I'm getting what I want. I'm relatively happy, well-adjusted, just got a pay rise, my girlfriend and I, the relationship's going well. You're not suffering. But then when I heard the translation, well, no, but there's also the unsatisfactory nature of all things. Dukkha, another translation is, or another facet is unsatisfactory. And then I thought, well, no, initially I thought, well, no, this is pretty satisfactory. It's all going the way I want it to go right now. But then when we start reflecting and maybe sort of deepening our practice around this, deepening our understanding, our reflective ability around this, we start to see, oh, right, well, I'm actually being quite protective because actually this could change to being not the way I want it. So that's not actually there's not a lasting satisfactoriness. It's not a lasting joy, a lasting happiness around this. So that's where also the dukkha is, that because things are impermanent, in particular, they're changing. I mean, we only can stabilize things so much that, all right, okay, then we start to see, and then we're beginning to penetrate more on a gut experiential level, dukkha. So I wanted to go through the three characteristics because now I'm going to start speaking about the topic that I really wanted to, or the aspect of looking at these about this spiritual bypassing. Because intellectually, especially the dukkha and anicca, impermanence and unsatisfactoriness, suffering, those are intellectually, for most of us, more easily grasped. The not self nature is for most of us is more challenging. But when we start to get a little bit of insight and knowledge around this, it is fairly easy to fall into the trap. For some of us, to fall into the trap of just, and this is where the spiritual bypassing, we're actually bypassing true penetration and understanding of these things, like real gut level understanding, heart level understanding, and almost using, say, like the phrase, like saying, well, you maybe somebody says, yeah, well, my 98-year-old grandmother just passed away, and then this is an extreme example, somewhat extreme, and then the other person says, well, everybody dies anyway, everything is impermanent. Yeah, but we feel the pain of loss. So that's like a dismissal It's like just a dismissing, saying, well, everybody dies anyway. Yeah, but there's still the as I said a moment ago, there's grief, there's pain. If we appreciated that person, somebody that's been in our life, maybe our entire life, and we miss them. So that's, but if we maybe do that to somebody else, first of all, that can be maybe not very helpful to that person, if not hurtful, unintentionally hurtful. But we do it to ourselves. So we can just with ourselves say, okay, we start putting the anicca dukkha label on things, because we've learned that enough intellectually. We can just say, oh, well, it's impermanent. Oh, it's empty. Oh, that's suffering. And we just sort of kind of wiping things aside, potentially. These are just potentials. I'm not saying that we all do this, but these are potentials. Is that we can just sort of, it's a bit like putting, if we do that, there is also this possibility that because we're not resolving we're not actually processing that experience for whatever it is, and it might even be it could be a joyful experience, it could be a painful experience, it could be whatever, everything from grief to bliss. But if we're not actually the heart, on a heart level, actually allowing whatever we experience to the feelings that will arise to manifest and just be what they are, could be a little bit like if we cover up a wound without washing it and then put a plaster on it. We could potentially be burying something. And this is where suppression, repression can manifest. We can be pushing things down, pushing things away, and of course, I shouldn't say of course, but typically where the more problematic things will arise is when things that are painful. Or just psychological, it could be pleasurable, but could be psychological ways of being. You're going to, especially around a sense of self, because this is where when we have when we're grasping at a sense of self, the believing in the I am, and especially if we're believing that, and it could be positive. Oh, I am better than this, or I'm really good at that, or I am sort of belief in that, or I'm useless, I'm worthless, believing in that. If we are not really allowing ourselves to use our spiritual, practice to allow those to resolve themselves fully. And on top of that, we're using maybe a spiritual bypassing of just, I used some examples already, but then it could actually, we could end up in a worse state. This could actually be really planting seeds for trouble in the future, not just trouble in the present. It's like, if we, this thing around emptiness, because emptiness, it sounds, oh, I'm dwelling in emptiness, or no, it's not. In a lot of the Theravada tradition, which is a tradition that we're very firmly rooted in, although the word emptiness in English is used, it's not maybe used. My impression is it's not as used as maybe some of the other Buddhist traditions. But I like it as a term. I find it quite helpful. But here again, if we maybe misuse that, it's like empty of what? Like, what are we talking about? If we say, oh, everything is empty, we need to, here again, we need to be reflecting, really looking at experience, looking at phenomena, and really not having a surface understanding either intellectually or on the heart level, on the gut level. But yeah, we can. I've done this. I have done this. It's not me just kind of saying, "Well, I've seen people do this." No, I have fallen into this trap before, and I'm not going to say that I'll never fall into the trap again. And so when I'm giving this reflection, it's also reminding myself not to fall into this. And very easy to do. And so when this came up in the mental health training, it was a good reminder. So we can do this to ourselves, with our own emotions, with our own experiences. So let's say something strong especially something strong, those are the things that are, it's a bit obvious. They land in a bigger way. Even good things. I remember when I was before I took up monastic life. I was living in London for 18 years, and I'd just kind of entered a new romantic relationship at that time, and I'd gone away for the weekend staying with some dear friends up in Suffolk, and there were other people staying there for the weekend, and I gave one of them a lift back to London. I remember very clearly, and so we had a good couple of hours together in the car, and we were talking about all sorts of things. I knew them. They weren't a good friend, but I was familiar with them, and so I could have a fairly open conversation. And I was actually going back to London and was going to go visit my then new friend, girlfriend, and this woman in the car said, "Well, I hope you have I hope." She just wished me well for the rest of my week, but also said, "I hope your relationship blossoms." And I remember really clearly saying, "Well, all things are everything is impermanent." And I kind of said it like that. I said, "Well, everything is impermanent." She went, "Well," I can't remember exactly what she said, but she was really unimpressed. And she had something that was actually I remember it being quite wise what she said, and she's like, "Well, okay, whatever." And so I remember that as a very clear, and I was relatively early on in my days of Buddhist practice, my years of beginnings of Buddhist practice. I was sort of wiping out, not understanding that there is transcendent reality, there is ultimate reality, where yes, there is no thing, everything is empty of essence, empty of self, and all things are transient, they all are shifting, they are ultimately unsatisfactory, but there is the mundane world. There is the material world, there is the emotional world, there is the relational world. And the Buddha put a lot of emphasis on also guiding people through that. He's on one hand he's saying everything is not self and empty, and on the other hand he's saying take care of these things. Like in our monastic form, for instance, the monastic rule book, the book of discipline, how many rules are just taking care of material things? The actual precepts that do with ethical conduct, moral conduct, they're not that different from the 5 precepts that the lay community follows. But there's so many rules around. Okay, if you get a hole in your robe, you need to have it sewn up within a certain amount of days, and this is how you clean. It even has instructions on how to clean your dwelling. Like how to take care of things, how to keep them in good repair, how to, look after yourself, look after your body, And so he here again, you had two hands. One thing was talking about ultimate reality, and the other thing saying, in mundane reality, look after it. Really look after that. He gave guidance on how to just live a good life. How to look, even lay community, how to look after your money. This portion for your family, this portion for a rainy day, this portion for this. He was giving advice, and so it's when we dismiss the mundane world as just another broad way of speaking about spiritual bypassing, of just dismissing it, and so and we start to maybe even dissociate from community, from family, from relationship, from the material world. And occasionally, it hasn't happened actually for several years here, but I know there was one particular time here where somebody came, and they seemed like a very peaceful person. They were, but they I remember asking them where they, because I try to engage a little bit, a guest or something in particular, and I said, well, hi, what's your name? Well, they call these 5 khandhas, which is the way we refer to the body. They call these 5 khandhas George. So no, and I thought, well, in terms of ultimate reality, he's right. So I can't actually criticize it, but I did kind of go, okay, but I don't, that's fine, fair enough. Where are you from? And he says, I dwell in emptiness. So here again, on an ultimate reality level, he's not wrong. So it's not. I'm not saying this to make fun of this person. However, there was a sort of dissociation. There is this thing called mundane reality. And can you imagine how annoying life would be if everybody was just going around, like your passport says they call 5 khandhas George, and where do you dwell in emptiness? No, I think, of course, that's a ridiculous example, but there is the ordinary. There is, so we talk about, there's that lovely chant that we do, the Nibbana Sutta, the Enlightenment Sutta. There's the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. So this is talking about ultimate reality. These are things that are not this. So this is formed. Seat is formed. Microphone is formed. Body is formed. Sangha is formed. Monasteries are formed. Britain is formed. The world is formed. The universe is formed. Everything is formed. Everything we hear, smell, see, taste, touch, think, feel is formed. And Nibbana, enlightenment, how can you describe it? Because apart from, it's the unformed, it's the unconditioned, and that's why it's so subtle and so. And I'm not talking about this from somebody who's realized Nibbana, but this is the goal: is that we can actually dwell with that realization, and yet live with the formed, the created, the born, the conditioned. So we're living in a conditioned realm. All of this realm that we live in, the world, society, family, body, temple, whatever, these are all formed. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's another thing when spiritual bypassing is that we can, if we dismiss things as that, oh, this is nothing. Because no, I don't need to look after the conditioned world because I'm either aiming for, or one of the most dangerous things is if we think we have realized enlightenment, realized this fully awakened state, and if we're suppressing, repressing, and actually haven't resolved our relationship with conditioned reality, with mundane reality. So it's trying to so that we're at least intellectually, this is how I can only speak about potentially what this awakened state is it it's almost like, because I wear bifocals. So it's very clear that when you get close to me, that there's the little lenses, and then there's the big lenses. And so perhaps maybe part of being in the awakened state is that we can actually, we're looking through, and we know the difference between the conditions. Maybe that's the little lenses, the little detailed ones. And I don't know. I'm just using this as an image, and that then there is actually ultimate reality is what conditions are actually part of or within. I'm just reflecting on this, but it's so because I can't speak about it, having not realized it. So yeah, just to recap, it's if we can use our practice, use the teachings. This evening, I've focused on the three characteristics of impermanence, or we can use the word transience, ephemerality, and so also the not self or empty nature of all things, the non-essence, the essence-less state of all things, be it a thing or a thought or whatever. The unsatisfactory, painful nature, the lack of contentedness from all things, discontent, dis-ease, suffering. So if we can maybe perhaps starting with that as our framework to just make sure that we really aren't just allowing these concepts to remain in the mind, to remain in the intellect, and to become sort of spiritual band-aids, sort of to just kind of put a plaster or just keep labeling, but to keep looking, to be open. So that then, the more and more, it's like keep looking. This is why using meditation, just sitting or walking slowly, reflection, seeing change, really reflecting on our experience, so that these things become just part and parcel of our mind and heart. And then if we do catch ourselves using these things as a maybe sort of spiritual bypassing, either towards ourselves or towards others, or even towards inanimate objects, So we have these, Amravati for a couple of events made these very nice mugs with the Dhamma phrase, this glass is already broken. Maybe some of you that have been to Amravati in the last few years, they were for particular events. And it's a phrase that Ajahn Chah apparently used, where he held up a glass during, like a talk, I suppose, like this, and said, well, this glass is already broken. And I like Ajahn Amro's story about, I think he was either an Anagarika or a very junior monk. During the break, he tells a story about, I guess nobody was around, he went up to look at the glass, because he was sitting quite far back in the hall. Apparently, at least the way he tells the story, he kind of went and checked it out. He's like, it's not broken. It's not cracked. So the way I understand this is that Luang Por Chah was pointing at the brokenness, the inherent brokenness in it because of its impermanence. So it will not always be a glass. And of course, it's easy to intellectually hear to understand that, but so he's just pointing that. But then on the other hand, then what I've also heard said, and hopefully, because this is hearsay, and hopefully I'm not misrepresenting this, is that but then Luang Por Chah would maybe when his assistant monks were cleaning his hut, or maybe moving these things, if they got a little bit reckless, he'd say, hey, be careful with that. Be careful. Now, I'm not saying this was said, but maybe they could easily have said, but Ajahn, the other night you said this glass is already broken. Yeah, but take care of it. Take care of it. So we can even do that. I know people that have done this with their physical well-being. Some spiritual practitioners that they've said, well, they stop maybe taking care of themselves well, because they said, well, that means I'm going to die anyway, and it's empty nature. But this is an amazing vehicle. This is our vehicle for awakening. And even if we're not striving for awakening, I mean, look at all the good that can be done in the human form, to help this planet, to help society, to help our family, to help without doing anything grand, but just to be a good human being. So so to be able to, but to balance those things, it's trying to hold those two things, of holding. Okay, these are the to trying to realize and let go of the clinging to these things, to let go, to clinging to self, to clinging to body, to clinging to glass. So like my mug, actually I have more than one. My mug that says this glass is already broken, I broke it about a month ago. And it was my favorite mug. It was just a perfect size for my cup of tea. And it fell into my ceramic sink. And it is now shattered. I still haven't wrapped it up and put it in the bin properly. And I kind of felt that. I thought, there was this, it was my favorite mug. And so there was a little twinge. Of course, it's different than losing a loved one, of course. But there was this little twinge, and also this little you were careless. You were careless. But that's what it points to. It's when we cling to things. Now that was just a little one, but especially if we're clinging to a sense of self that then gets challenged, that gets threatened, a sense of status, a sense of being, a sense of identity. This is the real where so much suffering is. And so, keep practicing, seeing these things. If we are doing any of these, maybe spiritual bypassing or clinging, whatever, it's about seeing and letting go. Seeing and letting go, letting it flow, even if it just keeps coming back, even if it's still there. So letting go doesn't necessarily mean gone. So even if we have a real habit of spiritual bypassing, by seeing that, and just when you see ourselves thinking that or doing it, just let it go. Just don't believe. You see it for what it is and go, this is a habit, and it will fade away. So we might be clinging to something, and we don't have to throw it away. We can just loosen our grip on that. And the same with our habits. It might be a habit, an impulse. You just let it. Just not pick up that, not act on that impulse. And so, especially, because I have, as I said, I've actually done this spiritual bypassing before. Fortunately, at least I haven't seen myself doing it lately, but I better keep an eye out, because that might be false. That also might be spiritual bypassing right there. Who knows? Seriously. And so, but to keep an eye out for it, and to be glad if we do see it, be gladdened that we see it. So then we can then resolve that. So anyway, it's just a topic that I've never really spoken about, and that piqued my interest yesterday when that came up. And so I just wanted to share these words, and I think it's enough for this evening. So I'll close here. What's that chant that we don't do very often, but on impermanence? Do you remember that one, Polly English? There's two of them. It's up in the 80s or 90s. Let's see. So, reflection on impermanence is 66.
characteristics, reflection on three characteristics is 72.
We'll do the 72. Page 72, dark brown book. We don't do this chant all that frequently, so if it sounds a bit rough, if it's not quite as smooth as our chanting can sometimes be, my apologies. So page 72. So this is the verses on the three characteristics that I was referring to. Andabayang tilakana digatayo banamase sabe sankara anijjati yada panya pasati atani bindati duke esamago visuddhiya. Impermanent are all conditioned things. When with wisdom this is seen, one feels weary of all dukkha. This is the path to purity. Sabbe sankara dukkati yada panyaya spasati atani bindati duke esamago visuddhiya. Dukkha are all conditioned things. When with wisdom this is seen, one feels weary of all dukkha. This is the path to purity. Sabbe dhamma anattati yada panyaya pasati atani bindati duke esamago visuddhiya. There is no self in anything. When with wisdom this is seen, one feels weary of all dukkha. This is the path to purity. Apakate manusesu ye jana paragamino atayang itarapaja tirang evanudavati. Few amongst humankind are those who go beyond, yet there are the many folks ever wandering on this shore. Ye chako sammadakate dhamme dhammanuvattino te jana parame santi Majjudeyang saduttarang. Wherever Dhamma is well taught, those who train in line with it are the ones who will cross over the realm of death so hard to flee. Kanhang dhammang vipahaya Sugang bhaveta pandito oka anokamagamo viveke yatta duramang tatra biratim micheya hitva kameya kinchano. Abandoning the darker states, the wise pursue the bright. From the flood's dry land they reach, living withdrawn so hard to do. Such rare delight one should desire, sense pleasures cast away, not having anything. We'll do the closing homage in Pali and English, which is on page 16 in the same book.